Okay, welcome to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we are jumping into a segment of the confectionery world that's showing some, well, pretty remarkable growth.
That's right. We're talking about the global sugar-free chocolate market.
Exactly. And our guide for this, our source material, is a really comprehensive set of market insights from cognitive market research.
Yeah, they've pulled together some great data. It really helps paint the picture of what's happening globally.
Absolutely. So our mission today is basically to unpack all this data. We want to understand, what's really driving this growth,
hmm
explore the key regional trends, and, well, ultimately get a clearer idea of where this market is actually headed.
So get ready to explore how health awareness and that desire for healthier indulgence are kind of reshaping chocolate options all over the world.
Okay, so let's kick off with the big picture numbers from cognitive market research. The global figures are pretty compelling, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely. The market was valued at, what, over $1.6 billion back in 2021?
Right. $1,626.9 million to be precise.
And the projection isn't just for like a little bit of growth. The report sees it hitting over $4.1 billion
4,189.7 million.
by 2033. I mean, that's more than doubling in just over a decade from that 2021 number.
That kind of trajectory, well, it translates to a global compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, of 8.2002% between 2021 and 2033.
Which is, a really strong growth rate for any market segment.
Especially one that's traditionally seen as, well, pure indulgence, right? Chocolate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And according to the source, the main reason behind this isn't like some big mystery.
Yeah.
It's explicitly linked to increasing global health awareness and a rise in dietary restrictions, too.
So people are actively looking for ways to enjoy treats.
But with less sugar or, no sugar at all.
Yeah.
And this isn't just some niche trend anymore. It seems like it's reshaping demand on a massive scale.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this region by region then, because the growth isn't totally uniform across the board.
Good idea.
North America, it's obviously a major part of this global market. The data shows it growing from over $621 million in 2021
$621.48 million, yeah.
to a projected $1.45 billion, roughly, by 2033.
$1,449.65 million. And that gives North America a regional KGR of 7.263% over that period.
Okay. And within that, the United States is, well, predictably the largest market by far.
Yeah, expected to go past $1 billion by 2033. It started at about $480 million in 2021.
With a solid KGR of 6.943%. Canada also shows pretty good growth, right?
Yep, 7.818% CGR for Canada, growing from about $100 million to $250 million.
Yes, okay. It's starting from a smaller base, about $41 million. But its projected CGR is significantly higher, 9.211%.
Right, that's quite a bit faster than the U.S. or Canada.
So what do you think is driving that acceleration in Mexico? Is it just that classic smaller base grows faster effect, or is there something else going on there?
Well, it's likely a combination. The smaller base definitely helps boost the percentage mathematically.
Sure.
But if you dig a bit deeper, this speed in Mexico, it could also point to maybe a rapidly expanding middle class, people who are increasingly adopting these global health and wellness trends.
Ah, okay.
Unlike, say, more saturated markets, the sugar-free category might just be establishing its foothold, its distribution networks, more quickly there, capturing consumers who are kind of new to this type of product.
So it reflects that health-conscious demand isn't just limited by, like, traditional market size or how mature the market is?
Exactly. It's spreading.
Fascinating point about that adoption curve. Okay, let's shift our focus then. Europe.
Right.
Europe represents another really substantial chunk of the market, growing from over $445 million in 2021
$445.773 million.
to a projected $1.1 billion by 2033.
$1,101.9 million, yeah, with a regional CQR of 7.797%. Pretty strong, too.
So looking at the data for specific countries there, you've got the major markets like the UK, Germany, France. They show steady, significant growth.
Right, they contribute big absolute numbers to the total. Their caviars are robust, roughly between 6.7% and 7.2%.
Italy and Russia are also showing solid growth in that sort of 7% to 8% range as well. But then, like with Mexico, you see some interesting outliers, countries like Spain, Switzerland, and Denmark.
In the rest of Europe category, too.
Right. They show notably higher CCOB years, often over 9%, even hitting 10% for that rest of Europe group.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So what could be pushing that faster growth in these specific European markets compared to their, larger neighbors?
Well, it could suggest a few different dynamics playing out, maybe specific local health initiatives or dietary trends gaining momentum really rapidly in those particular countries.
Okay.
Or it could also reflect maybe a faster rate of new product introductions and consumer adoption in markets that might have been just a little bit slower to embrace the sugar-free trend initially compared to, say, Germany or the UK.
So the higher charge years kind of indicate the trend is catching fire quickly there now. Consumers are maybe particularly receptive at the moment.
That seems plausible, yeah. The demand is really kicking in.
Okay, let's move again. Asia Pacific. The Cognitive Market Research Report really highlights this as a particularly high-growth engine for this market.
And the numbers definitely back that up. The region's projected to grow from, was it $366 million in 2021?
$366.055 million.
To exceed $1.1 billion by 2033, or $1,114.47 billion.
Which gives Asia Pacific an impressive regional CGR of 9.717%. That's significantly outpacing North America and Europe.
It really is. And when you look closer, you see some giants driving this. China is the largest market in APAC for sugar-free chocolate.
And a very high KGR, too.
Absolutely, 10.224%. Expected to reach over $400 million by 2033, up from about $123 million.
But the data point, for me at least, that jumps out even more is India.
Ah, yes, indeed.
India has the highest CAGR among the listed countries in APAC, an eye-popping 11.032%.
Wow.
It's growing from a smaller base, sure, around $42 million, but it's clearly on a trajectory to become a major player, hitting nearly $150 million.
Japan also shows solid growth, too, around 8.4% CAGR.
Right.
But that rapid acceleration across APAC, especially in places like China and India, it just really drives home the global nature of this whole health-conscious shift.
Yeah.
These are markets with huge populations, growing disposable incomes, and consumers are increasingly connecting, indulgence with wellness.
So the high KGRs here aren't just numbers on a page. They signal a pretty fundamental change in consumer preference, taking root on an enormous scale.
Absolutely. And even those broader categories like rest of APAC and Southeast Asia show really strong KGRs too, around 9.8% up to almost 11.8% for rest of APAC. It shows the trend is really widespread across the region.
Okay, all right. Let's quickly touch on the remaining regions then. South America, the Middle East, and Africa.
Okay.
South America, it's projected to grow from just over $82 million in 2021.
$82.97 million.
To over $226 million by 2033. That's a healthy 8.714% CAGR.
And the data points to Brazil as the largest market there, with a high CGR itself of 9.365%.
Okay. And the Middle East shows similar strong growth.
Yeah, moving from nearly $62 million, 61.8 M, to over $167 million, 167.59 M. That's an 8.898% CGR.
And the source highlights one country there specifically.
Qatar, yeah, it has a particularly high CGR in the region, 10.203%.
Wow, okay. And finally, Africa. It's starting from a smaller base, around $49 million.
$48.8 million.
Projected to reach nearly $130 million by 2033. Still a strong CAGR, though, 8.646%.
And the report mentions Nigeria and South Africa as key contributors there.
So the takeaway from these regions, even though their overall market sizes are smaller compared to the big three,
is that the trend is genuinely global. You see these strong CGRs, specific countries showing rapid adoption.
Mm-hmm.
It just confirms that this demand for sugar-free indulgence is a worldwide thing. It's not confined to, just the traditional developed markets anymore.
Right. So let's try and connect the dots here. All this data we've walked through from cognitive market research, the overall growth, the regional differences, those high KGRs and maybe unexpected places. What does this picture really mean for you, the listener, maybe as a consumer or perhaps someone just tracking market trends?
Well, I think fundamentally it illustrates a really powerful and widespread shift in consumer priorities.
Yeah.
People aren't necessarily giving up chocolate, far from it, but they're clearly demanding options that align better with their health goals or maybe their dietary needs.
And it's not marginal, right? The numbers show this is a substantial reshaping of a major market segment.
Exactly. And the fact that we see such rapid growth in really diverse markets, like India, China, Mexico, parts of the Middle East, South America. That tells us this is more than just some fleeting Western trend.
It feels like a global wave of health consciousness that's impacting consumer goods, and chocolate is just one very clear example based on this data.
Absolutely. The data from cognitive market research gives us a really solid, quite granular view that supports this whole narrative of a market undergoing significant transformation, all driven by, well, evolving consumer values.
So wrapping up our deep dive today then, the key takeaway seems pretty unmistakable.
Yep.
The global sugar-free chocolate market is on a steep upward trajectory, and it's fueled by a global consumer base that wants to indulge, sure, but increasingly on healthier terms.
Well said. And, given how clearly this data from the source shows consumers driving change in such a traditional indulgence like chocolate, it leaves you with a pretty fascinating question to maybe ponder. What other markets, maybe things you wouldn't initially think of as like health-related, might be the next ones to see significant disruption from this exact same consumer drive for healthier alternatives?
Interesting.
How might this trend continue to ripple through the entire food and beverage industry in the coming years?
Definitely something to chew on. Perhaps while considering your next sweet treat.
Perhaps.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Welcome along. We're doing a deep dive today that gets right to the sweet spot, or maybe the less sweet spot, depending on your perspective. We are diving into the really fascinating dynamics shaping the sugar-free chocolate market right now.
It's a big one. Lots happening there.
Yeah, and our main source for this exploration is coming straight from cognitive market research. They've done the heavy lifting.
Right.
And we've got their findings to help us unpack what's really driving growth, where the challenges are, basically get you up to speed quickly on this whole area.
It's definitely a market being pulled in a few different directions at once. You've got these really strong forces pushing it forward.
Okay.
But also some pretty significant resistance holding it back. Understanding how those forces play off each other is, I think, really the key.
Okay, so let's unpack that. According to the research, one of the biggest forces, maybe the biggest, pushing sugar-free chocolate forward is this, well, you can't deny it, this global trend towards rising health consciousness and big dietary shifts.
Absolutely. People are just, paying way more attention to wellness, reading labels, thinking about nutrients, and a huge part of that, maybe the most significant, is this growing worry over how much sugar we're all eating.
And it's a valid worry, isn't it? It's not just like a fad.
No, not at all. High sugar intake isn't just linked to, cavities or putting on weight anymore. The science is getting clearer and clearer.
Right.
It links it to serious stuff like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, even certain cancers. It's really shifted from just being a preference to a major public health issue for a lot of people.
And the data.
Yeah.
Wow, the data really brings that home. I was looking at the Harvard public health research they cited.
Yeah.
It links excessive sugar consumption to something like 180,000 obesity-related deaths globally every year.
That's a staggering number.
It really is. And in the U.S. alone, it's around 25,000 deaths annually, tied specifically to sugar through, diabetes, cardiovascular problems, cancer. Numbers like that really show why cutting down on sugar is such a big deal now.
And the industry sees this. They have to adapt. You look at big players like Nestle.
Yeah.
Well, for the Indian market specifically, they launched versions of Cerelac, the baby food.
Right.
With zero refined sugar. That tells you this concern isn't just for adults. It's changing product development right from the start.
That's a great point. And beyond just the health warnings, this whole shift is, it's also made easier because the substitutes are getting better, right?
Definitely. And availability, too.
Yeah, these products are just everywhere now. And the marketing is all about the healthier choice.
Which leads nicely into the second big driver the report mentions.
Okay. What's
Well,
that?
they call it an expanding consumer base plus this sort of relentless innovation happening.
Right. So it's not just a niche thing anymore, like for diabetics or serious fitness people.
Exactly. That's the key takeaway. The demand is broadening out. You're seeing younger people getting interested and just regular chocolate lovers who, maybe want that treat but are trying to be a bit more mindful about sugar without giving it up completely.
And social media must play a huge role there.
Oh, massive. It's like throwing fuel on the fire, as you said earlier. Influencers, wellness bloggers, They're constantly talking about sugar-free
Yeah,
options.
reviews, taste texts.
Sharing recipes, weaving it into their whole lifestyle thing. It just reaches so many people and kind of normalizes it, makes it seem, tasty and doable.
And companies are jumping on that. The report mentioned Zydus Wellness.
Yeah, that's a good example. They partnered with Malaika Arora, the Bollywood actress,
Okay.
to promote their sugar-free green, which is stevia-based. They're clearly using her fitness image to link the product to being healthy and active. It's smart marketing.
But it's not just marketing, is it? The actual product innovation sounds pretty impressive, too.
Oh, definitely. For years, let's be honest, sugar-free chocolate often tasted, well, a bit off.
Yeah, you could tell.
But they're getting so much better now at keeping that creamy texture, that rich flavor we expect even without the sugar. That's a real science challenge they're tackling.
Which then opens up possibilities for, like, customization.
Exactly. Now you're seeing chocolates designed for specific diets, things like keto-friendly bars or options with added protein.
Right.
Or even focusing on gut health, all while keeping the sugar out.
And the innovation gets even wilder, right? The report mentions sugar-free edibles.
Yeah, it's pushing into totally new areas. Companies launching edibles infused with things like delta-9 THC or even live rosin.
Wow.
And they're specifically making these sugar-free using natural, low-calorie sweeteners like allulose. It shows how tech and consumer trends are kind of merging, creating these whole new categories under that sugar-free banner.
And using something like live rosin that often has this perception of being higher quality, maybe more natural.
Exactly, which feeds right back into that whole health-conscious driver we started with. It all connects.
So, okay, you got these really strong tailwinds, health worries, more people interested, genuinely cool innovation, loads of momentum for sugar-free chocolate. But the Cognitive Market Research report is equally clear. It's not all plain sailing. There are big challenges too.
That's the other side of the coin, definitely. And the biggest hurdle is probably this lingering consumer skepticism about the sugar alternatives themselves.
Right, you hear so many mixed things.
Exactly. There are ongoing debates, conflicting reports about safety, long-term effects, and all that uncertainty makes people cautious.
Although it's fair to say some big health organizations have given, like, cautious endorsements.
They have the AHA, the ADA. They basically say artificial sweeteners can be useful tools, especially if you're managing obesity or diabetes as a sugar replacement.
Okay.
And the FDA, they have approved a specific list, artificial ones like aspartame, sucralose.
The familiar names.
Yeah, and also stevia, which is the one natural low-calorie sweetener on their approved list.
But even with those approvals, the skepticism is still there. Why is that, do you think?
Well, part of it is just personal experience.
Yeah.
Some people do report, digestive issues like bloating or diarrhea from certain sweeteners.
Okay.
But then there are the more serious concerns fueled by some studies that seem to raise potential red flags about longer-term impacts.
Right. I saw the report mentioned a study in the BMJ.
Yes, that one got a lot of attention. It associated higher intake of artificial sweeteners with, I think it was a 9% higher risk of cardiovascular events overall.
Wow.
And an 18% increased risk of stroke, specifically. Now, that research is complex, correlation isn't causation, but...
But headlines like that stick, don't they?
Yeah.
Especially if you're already trying to make healthier choices.
Exactly. It feeds into existing worries.
Yeah.
So these kinds of reports, combined with just years of back-and-forth headlines, they definitely put a drag on the market's potential, no matter how good the chocolate tastes.
Yeah, you can see the tension there.
It really underscores how crucial transparency is from the manufacturers and the need for more, robust independent research to try and build some real consumer trust.
So if you zoom out and look at the big picture from the cognitive market research, it really is this story of push and pull, isn't it?
Absolutely. On one side, you've got this huge momentum, global health trends, innovation making products genuinely better, more appealing than ever.
The real wave.
A real wave. But on the other side, you have this deep, sometimes data-backed skepticism about the very things needed to make them sugar-free.
Yeah. It's like the market's trying to accelerate with the handbrake partly on.
That's a good way to put it. Trying to race forward on innovation, but constantly having to address this fundamental lack of trust in some of the core ingredients.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As the science keeps evolving, giving us maybe even newer ways to get sweetness without sugar. And as we understand, the health impacts better. How is the industry going to navigate all this?
Yeah, how do we strike that balance between, that basic human craving for sweetness and this drive for wellness.
And what role does trust play in that future? Trust in the science, trust in the ingredients.
It feels like consumer confidence. It isn't just a challenge for this market, it might actually be the biggest single factor determining where it ultimately goes.
Definitely something to chew on next time you're looking at the chocolate aisle.